So let me do some welcomes. This is like standing at the door and the opportunity to welcome people who I enjoy and to say hi to Carol and Batya, to Rabbi Robin. Welcome, Mark. And Helene's on as my backup. Cliff Cornell. I think is that yours, Cliff? A mask is not a political statement, it's an IQ test. So it is, I think, distinctive, and I'm not looking in any way to get into politics in this phone call because this is a safe space for everybody. And people do have in a synagogue different political orientations. Having said that, I'll step close to the line by saying that whether masks are medically indicated or not, and preparing for today, both the CDC in mid-May came out clearly, as did the World Health Organization, for the value of masks. I believe it's the only country in which there is a political divide on the issue. So England, for instance, where COVID hit the prime minister, he's very careful these days and always has a mask. And in England, that seems to be, as an example, or in Canada, those are givens. We do live in a politically charged time. And so with that, again, I'm not looking particularly to be political at all in this call. So I won't be making references to any of the political leaders. Not that people can't. It's open for people to say what they will. Different roles for participants. I'll introduce this a little bit more in terms of what I see as the goals. I'll do a few more welcomes as people are coming on. I just want to welcome Ed Heyman and Barbara Brumbelow. I want to put in an advertisement. I'm warming up, and that's many of you have joined me for Psalms in the morning. Tomorrow's Psalm, which I just finished preparing, Psalm 39, is particularly dramatically sad. So if Jews can have the blues. We say African American community, we honor the music of the blues. I do. Well, Jewish blues is powerfully presented in Psalms, and no more than tomorrow. Phyllis Abrams is checking in from New Jersey with Steve Littman on my screen right next to her, but in Tustin. So nice to see the two of you side by side, although separated by a continent. I want to welcome welcome Sharon Green and Marla Nathan. Good to see you, Marla. I liked your greeting and Scott's on Sunday night. That was nicely done. It was a nicely done event, wasn't it? It was just a lovely event.
Yeah, you and Linda looked really nice. I was very impressed with you.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you. That was in our dining room. I brought you into the inner sanctum of my office, not unlike Jacob Green. I want to welcome you into Jacob's office as well. So for this meeting, still have a few minutes. I'm going to honor Jacob maybe as a past participant of our COVID series. Maybe you'll do a little update a little later. I did prepare a little with my wife, Linda, with some statistics. So the goal here is more personal sharing than medical presentation. So let's see.
I enjoyed your haircut Facebook post, by the way, Rabbi.
Oh, thank you. It was kind of an act of vanity at my age to grow it out and see it in full formation. But it is so much more comfortable in my case, getting a haircut. I remember why I get haircuts, because it's so much more comfortable. And I was fortunate. I have a regular haircut person, and I, bottom line, saw her at 8 a.m. yesterday. before anybody else came to the store, which was my request. And, it wasn't within 2 hours that the hair place had got shut down.
Just
I
made it, huh?
just made it under the wire there. I continue to marvel, and I've done this with my class with Psalms, over how comfortable people have gotten with Zoom. So now that it's like a minute to 5, it just keeps popping. Where in my case, I still check in 10 minutes early, but people are gaining their confidence. I'll just wait a minute or two, knowing that some people come in under just at the wire. We did actually have a nice sign up. I know with almost twice as many people that are on the screen now. I'll just wait and welcome Ingrid Gallon. Nice to see Ingrid and Loretta and Herb. Good to welcome you. And Marcia and Marshall Margolis. We gather. Well, it's now after 5, and so I'm going to start with some preliminary, and people will keep coming on. My goal is to have a conversation of about 30 to 40 minutes, probably closer to 40, and I will call it Adventures in COVID Land. On my calendar, and I'm sorely reminded of it, Linda and I would be in Norway today, day 1 in Norway, getting ready to do a cruise in the Arctic to look at polar bears and reindeer and climate change. And I really look forward to this. I did what I rarely do, which is made all the plans almost 7 months ago, which I'm still in the midst of trying to unravel, which is only to say, this is normally the time many of us would be spreading our wings and traveling a bit in the midst of summer. And the analogy that I use for what we're all doing together is exploring uncharted territory, new place for the last 3 months, and that's COVID land, where the rules are different than the way we normally had lived our lives. And what I love about travel is precisely the adventure of seeing that which is unfamiliar, which enables me to see the familiar with fresh eyes. So what I would normally take for granted, how people eat or dress, prioritize time in terms of travel, new scenery. When I come back, or even while I'm there, I'm aware of what I'm used to seeing. And so COVID land, this space we're in, has made what we otherwise took for granted pop. It's now to be seen with fresh eyes. And that's what I want to explore together is, what has this journey of COVID land been like for the people sharing in this conversation, both in terms of the challenges as well as the positive surprises, the fears, as well as the satisfaction. And then we'll talk a little bit about where we see it going. But as I know people are still coming on, for those who are on time, let me just share some statistics that my wife Linda made me aware of. And this is from the California Gov site, covid19.california.gov of today. So California has now over 40 million residents. We are, as you may know, more than 1 out of 10 people living in America live in California. We've had a total, as of today, of 336,000 total coronavirus cases. But here's the shocking part. 107,000, which means just about a third of the total of cases of the last 4 months have been in the last 14 days. Isn't that remarkable? I didn't know it was that extreme, but that's the statistic. Our death rate is also deeply disturbing. We've had over 1,100 deaths in the last 14 days, with over 7,000 deaths in California to date. The CDC basically says, in terms of going from phase 1, and again, this is where Jacob Green's more of an expert than I, so I hope I'm getting this one right, say that you should have about 1% of those testing positive when you're ready to open up. That was the original CDC guidelines. Currently in California, it's greater than 7% are testing positive. That's quite disturbing. California at the moment does have ICU beds available. Only 1 out of 3 are being used, but 2 out of 3 ventilators are currently being used in California. And good news, just last night, the New England Journal of Medicine, one of the more prestigious journals of medicine, had an article on a vaccine for COVID produced by Moderna, who are just finishing their phase 1 trials, which is, I guess there's 3 phases. So phase 1 is small. It's 45 volunteers. And there's 3 key questions that come with testing a new vaccine. And that is, 1, does it work? 2, is it safe? And 3, how effective is it? What's the duration of the protection? The only thing they've tested with this phase 1 is, does it work? And it worked well enough to get an article in last night's New England Journal of Medicine, which is to say, of the 45 people, it seems to be effective, though with some significant side effects in terms of while they were responding to the vaccine taking hold, there were some significant chills and discomfort and such, but nothing too severe. So it does seem to have an efficacy. The next phase will be a much larger number to, again, validate the efficacy and to double check its safety. But they're gearing up for 2021 to be producing between 500,000 to 1 million doses. And the big question will be, for all these vaccines, when we say that it's effective, what does that mean? It's the same question with the antibodies. So if somebody has antibodies because they've had COVID, the question still remains, how long does that protect you for? And that's not yet clear at all. Is there a half-life? And if so, what is that duration? Which is to say, in sum, we are in COVID land, a land of uncertainty, a land in danger, a land that has turned our normal life into this surreal place where we're all meeting here as little boxes on screens in our own homes rather than in person. So that's a little bit of a giving medical context to this moment, to say the last 14 days have taken us by surprise in California when we thought things were moving forward positively. A surge that represents almost a third of all cases. Now here's some good news, and I'm going to then stop at the medical side and talk more about our own life COVID journeys. And that is my son, John, who was on one of these sharings, said that in the Mount Sinai emergency room, there's 3 different Mount Sinai emergency rooms in New York, but his service last week, he only saw one COVID positive patient, and that's not what brought the patient to the ER. They came to the ER because of a car accident, were then tested for purposes of being hospitalized, and turned out to be positive, which is to say New York City, which 2 months ago was overflowing with COVID patients in the ER. It's another world right now, another world to what it was, but another world to, talking with Morrie and Roberta Fleishman, whose daughter works in the medical system in Phoenix, Arizona, where things are off the charts at the moment, or here, Texas, around the country. So that's hope making. New York is a story that's hope making, but New York had it really, really, really tough, and there's no easy path. But hope's important. So my goal in this particular gathering is different than the others. Here are the expertises and everybody on the screen, because what I'm looking to learn from you and to learn from each other is what COVID land has been like for you. To what degree is this been what has, to frame it as the opening question, what has surprised you about life in COVID land? So pick one thing, because there's a lot of screens, more than 30 now. What's one thing that has surprised you about the challenge of journey in COVID land? And I'm gonna, with Helene, I'm gonna make you, Helene is always a step ahead. I don't need to make her a co-host because she made herself a co-host. So you'll help Helene identify people who might have something to share to. Unmute. Again, you can hit your keypad to unmute yourself. Fill in the blank. What has most surprised me as one thing about journey in COVID land has been? Go right ahead.
Can I volunteer?
Please, Phyllis. Phyllis in New Jersey.
So what I find is, for those of us who remember the seatbelt discussion, why people continue in the face of the science to throw hissy fits about this whole business of protecting each other and how visceral that has gotten.
So I'm going to reframe the comments. So for Phyllis, what's a mind bender in COVID land is how basic safety measures, the mask, are not unlike a seatbelt, but the mask is made into a source of hissy fit, to quote Phyllis. And it is deeply disturbing. Linda's online now, and Linda said to me, at a red light recently, why shouldn't I be able to go? I mean, why should my freedom be constrained? So, where do you draw lines in terms of freedom and health precaution? That's Phyllis's key thing. If it's demonstrably a health precaution, what surprises me, Phyllis says, is that this is debatable. What else? What else has surprised you?
Rabbi, can I add on to what Phyllis said?
Yes, that's Helene. Okay.
Yes, Helene. So not only that, but the interesting thing is the people that you thought were like-minded with you, that would be on the same page as wearing a mask and taking precautions, have done a 360, and they're posting all these things about how their freedoms are taken away, and you don't know who this person is anymore. So that's also the interesting thing, is people thought you knew, and you thought you knew their ideology. Or on the flip side, people that you thought would think that masks were restrictive and wouldn't, or a proponent for it. So it's interesting. It's do you really know who your friends really are and what they think? That's what I found very remarkable.
And again, regarding masks, I'll first reframe what Helene says. The part that's surprising is those, building on Phyllis's, those who won't wear a mask which is done to protect others, it's beyond words that they wouldn't have the consideration to be protective of others. And it surprises me sometimes people I know and even like taking that position, and it leaves me completely befuddled. I won't personalize it beyond that, Helene. I'll just say befuddled, and I'll get it too.
I'm very surprised that those who
Rochelle? Go ahead, Rochelle.
those that are sending out the message would actually assume that the majority of people really care about protecting others. To me, that's not geared to the younger group who's already been told, that they won't get a bad case if they get it. The messaging has just been so crazy making.
Another word, Rochelle, what would you think is the right messaging?
Wear a mask. It will protect you and it will protect others.
Yeah.
Young people and those who believe in their, pardon the expression, freedom, they don't hear much about others. It's all about them.
Yeah. And that's the part that's so viscerally disturbing, the quality of selfishness.
Yes.
It can only be called selfish. It's interesting, building on Phyllis's comment about it's no different than seatbelts, which get legislated. Remarkably, here in Orange County, our Board of Supervisors said, we recommend that children going back to schools wear masks, but we don't require it. And we're an outlier. Orange County is an outlier, again, compared to LA and San Diego. Carol, go ahead.
I belong to this next door neighborhood kind of thing in this area. And one gentleman put up something about going to one of the stores and people weren't wearing masks. And he felt the manager should have asked them to wear a mask or to leave. And I guess it's not actually required, But in answer to that, there must have been literally 200 answers that I got, because it comes into my email. So every time somebody comments, I get an email.
What was the prompt?
I look at my email and there's like a list like this, next door, and I started reading some of them, and I did. Most people supported him. Most people did say that we should be wearing masks. So that was heartening to some degree.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I mean, and it did get political on that site. It did.
I think also that people have a very hard time tolerating any form of discomfort. And so when they out of their routine or they have to do something which they're not comfortable with, because wearing a mask isn't always comfortable, or doing things, I think that people have a difficult time with that.
So that's the reality that, again, back to COVID land and all unfamiliar in terrain for many people. And I see this particularly when I go running, I see it particularly with men walking, that men are more resistant, at least in my observation, to being forced to do something that feels uncomfortable and unfamiliar. And momentum is very powerful, meaning what we're used to doing. And this is unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Yeah. So no doubt that's part of the motivation. Do we have any women on our Orange County Board of Supervisors? Just curious. Does anybody know? Does Jacob Green know? Do we have any women on our Board of Supervisors?
We do.
Yes, we do.
Michelle Steele?
Yeah.
Oh, we do.
And
Michelle
board
Steele
chair
is,
was also, yes.
But
Okay.
she's against masks, from what I
right,
understand.
She's against masks. All right.
yes.
It is. The mask issue really is quite baffling, precisely because I was trying to look up before I went online now because I've heard in passing these statistics of the difference it makes if people are wearing masks in terms of reducing spread. The number that is in my mind is it reduces it as up to 80%. Though I couldn't confirm it when I went to look. I just could confirm that both the CDC and WHO both came across with a clear statement that this is required for health at this point. But it is significant in terms of slowing the spread. So let's bracket masks. Not that it's not important, it's probably the most central in terms of what we can do. But for the bigger canvas of COVID land, what has surprised you about being in this unfamiliar space?
Rabbi, can I,
Yeah.
Hal, yes.
Go ahead, Hal.
Okay. An observation about the effect here. John and I live in the center of Laguna Beach, cottage just a couple of blocks from the water. And last weekend was traditionally the biggest weekend of the year. July 4th, you could not get into town because of the traffic. You couldn't get in the beach because there were so many people, and then waited for fireworks that night. This past July 4th, the city was a ghost town.
Yeah.
There was nobody here at all. And so it was just
Wonderful.
astounding and shocking to see. I mean, this is the effect of this virus in a kind of local situation that we were a part of.
So two things to just again reframe and validate. Laguna, when came up earlier in the conversation, as you may have heard, when I drove through it 10 days ago, maybe it's 3 weeks ago, a lot of people did not have masks, but it was Linda and my observation that most of them look like tourists, not
Right.
like locals.
Yes, that's right.
Right.
Exactly.
And in this case, Laguna shut its beaches
Yes.
early and made it a public announcement that July 4th,
Right.
before any of the other beach communities.
Right.
And in that sense, tourists knew there was nothing to go to see.
Right.
And the locals tend to be more probably responsible.
Yes, no doubt.
So that, you know what, but it is dramatic. And whether it was July 4th, which was an extreme, as you describe it, Hal, when Linda and I drove through it, there weren't that many people out, which is to say, to see a place that you're fond of, you're used to seeing with people in the summertime, and to see things so quiet,
Yes.
is again to know we're in COVID land.
Right.
Amazing. And that things can change. Other observations? What has most surprised me about being in COVID land, Dalia?
I think the biggest thing for me is how swift the change was in the matter of really a few days, from this is coming, this is coming, this is coming. And, you know, we're all like, okay, it's a bad flu. Just suddenly, you know, you have to wear masks and you have to wear gloves. This is at the very beginning, before it had really, you know, were aware of what we were dealing with. And the transition from what I would call a typical society to one that is completely overwhelmed by its circumstances seemed to be overnight. And that surprised me very much, that I'm not having lived, thank God, through a war. I mean, the Vietnam War, but I was a very young child. And not having lived through anything like World War II here in the United States, it felt like the only thing I could, even though it's not nearly as bad, was this overall, I feel like we're all Eeyore and there's like a rain cloud over us. It just feels very heavy. But it was the rapid, like going from everything is okay to suddenly everything is definitely not okay. And that was surprising to me, how quickly that happened.
So let me again just reframe and draw from what you shared, Dalia. And that's the speed, the immediacy of, you know, like a snap of a finger, we have to now quarantine. We were the first state in the country to quarantine. And the sense of national-state emergency, that never having lived through a major war, there was a sense of there's this cloud over us, and this is real, urgent, and the ability of the government, state, governor, shut down, people going into quarantine. And that is dramatic and unprecedented, and a reminder how quickly things can change.
Yes. Yeah.
And I'll add one more piece to that, Dalia, that gets triggered for me, and that's the power of momentum. That's one of my most powerful takeaways. You know, we were going to have a speaker at CBI, and it was Danny Matt, the great writer, translator of the Zohar, and we were going to have him on a Sunday. We would shut down that Wednesday. And he said a couple weeks before, I'm not comfortable flying. The Bay Area got it earlier than we did, but I'll drive. And he pulled the plug only the night before. We had already decided at CBI and CSP that we would do it from the sanctuary and have some physical distancing, because that was the beginning of this, you know, let's maintain some physical distance. But we weren't yet quarantining. And it took him needing to, if you will, shift to thinking, I'm going to get in my car and now drive from Berkeley to Orange County to give a speech. That makes no sense. But we who were hosting and had publicized it and were excited to have them, we were modifying, but our momentum was very different, which is to say that when you can't see it, it's just beginning, even when the scientists tell you it's coming, right? The hurricane is just off the shore, but it's not yet raining. You go, I don't know. Momentum, bottom line, is a very powerful force. And now I'm free associating, but it's the power of government in this case, the governor, Governor Newsom, to early say, we're closing. You may not see it. It may just be these isolated, but this is clearly coming, and we got to shut down. We got to quarantine. We didn't have masks yet. Masks came for our CDC not till mid-March. I mean, not till the end of March, not till like 2 weeks later. So bottom line, things can change in a moment, or as Dalia said, the swiftness of responding to a state emergency, a national emergency. Others, in terms of things that have surprised you in COVID land? Carol has another reaction. Go ahead. You got to unmute yourself, Carol.
What's scary is that up until the last 2 weeks, I didn't know of anybody, or a friend of mine didn't know anybody who had the COVID. Now I do. So it's gotten closer.
Yeah.
That's what's scary. It's gotten closer to me.
Yeah. It makes it more real when you know somebody.
Yeah.
That
And I was supposedly exposed. So that
have you tested?
Yes, that wasn't easy to get a test.
Yeah.
I got it.
That's good, and I assume you're obviously
Yeah,
you're
I was
fine.
fine.
So I will add, we're a relatively small community, 400 families. I know of 3 people in our community that have had COVID, not too serious, not too severely reactive to it, but we have had 2 of our community members lose a parent on the East Coast to COVID in the last 3 months, which is to say it's real and it's dangerous. Other reactions, Koresh?
Hi, hello, Rabbi. Hello, everybody.
Good to see you.
I kind of joined a little bit late, so I'm not sure if this was discussed or not, but I had 2 thoughts. One, it gave a sense of proportion, and I'll explain that. I think, being a finance guy, I'm always interested in numbers, and I never realized, well, I hadn't looked it up, that LA County is larger than about 40 of our 50 states by itself.
Wow.
And it's
county.
Twice as large as the next county in the whole United States, so over 10 million population. California with 40 million is larger than many countries that are in the news. So that sense of proportion, and we sometimes feel that the country wasn't mobilized early enough. But when I put that in perspective, I think, I mean, like you said, California was really well mobilized early on. And, you know, we probably have some fatigue now. That's what has been driving the numbers up. So that was one thought. And the second thing is, you know, the things you have to negotiate. You know, if we want to go and visit someone in their backyard, you have to really almost like have a contract or a handshake that this is how we operate. We want to have masks on. We want to be this far apart. We want to have separate tables. You almost have to discuss all of that before going on haphazardly to visit anyone. And I think those are two things that are new and interesting to me.
So I'm just going to again reframe what you've added, Korosh, that hasn't been shared yet. The first, which was context, and that is the size of LA County. We don't think of it as, you know, more than 10 million and being larger than 40 states in its own case. And that California started early. We were a model of being vigilant, seemingly, and yet here we are. One of the statistics I shared, Korosh, is that in the last 14 days, California has had 1/3 of its reported coronavirus positives, which is, we're really in a very dramatic moment of the rise of COVID and through coronavirus. And the second piece is that everything is on some level unfamiliar socially, on the social level, so that whether it's shopping or visiting friends, you have to constantly be clear what the rules are and abide by rules that were never part of how you did these things. And that takes a lot of energy. I know when I go shopping, so once a week, more or less, I try to buy things for Shabbat. Bottom line, I wear a very good mask, an N95, which seems to have protected my son in the ER, so I have an N95. But I feel like I'm going into an ER, meaning that there's danger. And I leave feeling the anxiety of having been in danger and a quality of fatigue. And that's the last piece that I want to emphasize from what Korosh said, is that what is now true for me is it's another phase of stamina. It's no longer novel that we have to do all these things. It feels often exhausting. At the end of the day, between screen time, between lack of contact physically with people, I'm tired in ways that is, I think, more than in the past. I'm going to take one more. Ingrid is going to fill in the blank about what has surprised me about COVID land. And then I want to shift to another related focus. Ingrid, go ahead.
One of the things that has surprised me a lot is these waves of loneliness that have come over me, where that's very, very hard for me. Also, since I'm a lip reader and use my eyes to hear to an extent, it's very difficult for me to communicate with people when they're wearing a mask, because I depend completely on their eyes, and their eyes just don't do that, don't really communicate like their mouths do. Wow. So this is a very, very difficult thing for me. In my life, I've been sequestered several times in China, so it was not a big deal to be doing that. But this was a very surprising, maybe it has to do with my age, I don't know. But it's the loneliness of being not a part of things is a very, very difficult thing for me, and very surprising.
Thank you for sharing that, Ingrid. And I want to just amplify it and to say, when you share that, I too am aware, we're both blessed. You're blessed with Joel, I'm blessed with Linda. We have partners, at least
Sure.
to watch TV with and talk and
Right.
have a meal
Exactly.
with. So my first thought is how fortunate we are, one,
Mhm.
to have a partner, and how many people are often alone. It's one
That's
of the
true.
great dramas of this moment is aloneness - loneliness. But I do also, you've trusted us with a quality of vulnerability about lonely, because we normally don't want to reveal that we feel lonely. And I too am aware, as much and gratified as I am to have a partner,
Mhm.
it's different when you don't interact with other people in the same
Correct.
way. And
That's
I do
correct.
feel this quality at times of loneliness as well. And
Mhm.
it's surprising, and yet it's one of those things we take for granted,
Mhm.
namely that we're fed by others and now don't get fed that same way.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. And if it's related to age or not, I don't know. I think that's why young people are breaking these rules, is they are less self-disciplined and have in some ways even a stronger need. They're literally wired when they're younger to gather, more so than I think when we get older, or we're more self-contained. But it's so profound, this basic human need to interact, to shake a hand. It's so remarkably weird, back to the comment that Korosh said about negotiating. It's so weird when you do get to see somebody and not to be able to shake their hand goodbye, to say, it's been nice to be with you, but it just feels weird. And the last, Ingrid, again, for sharing a vulnerability and a fascinating insight, and that is masks for somebody who reads lips takes away a major opportunity to understand. And that's stuff you don't think about till you think about it. And to say this is a difficult time for different people in different ways. So because I have an eye on the clock and we're almost at 40 minutes of this conversation, we still have another 10, 15. And that is back to using the image of COVID land, right? Travel. I'm aware that in traveling, it's after the fact, I harvest all the sweet memories. But when I'm traveling, it's often a lot of hassle. In any one day, there's a greater sense of fatigue, a greater sense of needing to strain to get oriented and to take in the world. And it's not easy to do adventure travel. And this is an adventure. We're all on this adventure. So what is it you think you'll take away from COVID land? What is something positive that you would want to hold on to from this unfamiliarity that we're all sharing?
The sense of community or communities that have developed over Zoom within the last 4 months. It's been remarkable. It's been wonderful to see many of you several times a week or once a week. Sometimes our services, which do have to be streamed, I understand that, but I wish that we could see each other's faces. And with my family scattered all over the country, and some of you know I go to Shabbat morning services at 7 o'clock in Flint, and that's a Zoom service. And that sense of community has helped over the facts that that I can't hug you in person.
Thank you, Mimi. And again, the takeaway there is the opportunity to develop community by Zoom. Like in this moment here, I just pause in this moment to look. I have to click because we have 2 screens, which is gratifying. Here on the screen, I didn't look at this other screen. So I'm just gonna pause and see all these wonderful people that I don't get to see in person, and names. So that's a positive, and the positive of Zoom. Steve Littman?
I find it's an odd feeling that I will have forever, I believe now, that home is more of a sanctuary, and that when I close and lock the doors and that we are home at night, that I feel safe. Whereas every other thing has some type of anxiety or possible compromise to it. But now home has taken on a whole new meaning for me.
That's a beautiful thought, in that when we think of home, it's more than a house, it's a place of sanctuary. And we're more aware of it as sanctuary, a safe space, than we did before. And for me, that also translates into investing in the space to make it more home. Others, what do you anticipate as a takeaway from COVID land? Dalia? Go ahead, Dalia.
I think one thing that I have noticed is I don't remember who was mentioning it, but getting together with family, because we're the only family in the area that has a backyard and has enough room. We have to set up an extra table, but we have to do all these negotiations about who's wearing a mask, because we have 2 elderly parents, and I have a brother-in-law who's twice recovered from cancer. But I have found a much deeper, like Stephen was saying about home being sanctuary. When I do get to see my family, I am so grateful. And I've always been grateful for family, but I think now absolutely even more so. The feelings are deeper, because I know that I don't know when I'm going to be able to see them again, and that this is even, hopefully soon, but it's always a sort of it's a bit of a contract negotiating, et cetera, to figure it all out. But I have found myself just very much more grateful for the people that are in my life. My feelings are just even deeper than I didn't think that they could be. I'm just very grateful that they're there. I was able to visit my father, who's in a retirement home. For some of you who don't know, he has Alzheimer's, but we did the distancing, and they sat on the lawn, and he and his wife. And so that for me has been remarkable and something I will take away. And I'm also journaling it, because I want to look back at this. This is a historical event worldwide, and I'm curious to see, when I read it, God willing, years from now, how it impacted me and my family.
So I just, again, underscore a couple things that Dalia shared, and that is family becomes all the more precious in the midst of uncertainty, the uncertainty of how and when you'll be together. And it just makes it all the more precious and valued. And that this is a moment that is unparalleled, in that the whole world is in COVID land. And in that regard, it will be remembered as a historical phase, God willing, but a phase. Other comments in terms of what you think you'll take from COVID land, how it will change you, or what you would want to hold on to? And I'm, again, looking for hands, or
I
just
think,
Helene.
I think that I will never take a Shabbat dinner or a hug for granted ever again, because I entertain, I have 100 people for Break the Fast. I have, Shabbat dinner with big crowds every week. So for that, I feel like I'm missing out on the fact that I'm not able to have people over. So I think when this is all over, I will never take for granted or say, oh gosh, I'm tired, why am I doing this, ever again. Because it's just, I miss that part of it so much. And it's just part of my life that's not there anymore.
So the things, again, that we took for granted, hosting others, and Helene is the consummate hostess, are to be valued. Though it's okay to get tired in the future, Helene, and say, I need a break too. Others, in terms of what your takeaways?
I think.
Who's speaking? Phyllis?
Oh, Marla.
Marla, go ahead, Marla.
I think when this all came, the first thing I thought is, how am I going to make this something positive? And slowing down, I think I really felt this was a big pause on my life, and slowing down and realizing how much more time, because all of a sudden you have nothing, not a lot to do. And I really kind of like that idea of slowing down. waking up on a Saturday actually or Sunday and having absolutely no plans actually feels very good. But at the same time, there's not very much to do, and doing something like delivering some baskets for the Shabbat, for the gala. I thought, wow, I have an activity. I actually have something to do today. And that was, an hour of my time. But I really relished in actually just going out and doing something, because there's very few things we do. And we noticed, Scott and I, we're just every day we go, okay, we've been in the house all day long. And you absolutely do enjoy it. We enjoy our house. We feel how grateful we are that we have a home, we have a yard, and we have space. So I think that, and cooking has been a big change, where we cook a lot. We've experimented a lot. We've really enjoyed the cooking. I've enjoyed cooking a lot. So I try to find positive things to take away from all of this, and know that one day, there is a light at the tunnel that will, some point, hopefully gonna, end. But I try to stay positive.
The other thing, if I could jump in on what Marla said, is that the cooking thing. So my dear other half, who's on the call, figured out that he finally could make challah. So that's been a joy. And we've also gotten to know a number of our neighbors and their dogs. And we've gotten to know a number of the neighbors by their dogs. Sometimes it's the husband walking the dog. Sometimes it's the wife walking the dog. But for the people who will talk to you or smile at you, or we joked at one point, Stephen and I, that we were going to get shirts that said, "You cannot get the virus by saying hello," because people were so like, it was just a little strange. But in addition to the cooking, and in our case, the challah, it's just getting to know a little bit more about your own personal space, that you've never taken the time to look around your neighborhood and opened your eyes and recognized all the people that may not be family, but are pretty near and dear to you.
Thank you. Who else? Rabbi Robin, and then Morrie, and then Miriam Nino.
Thank you. So one of the takeaways that I have has to do with our own Jewish community, CBI, of course, but the greater Jewish community. I've had the opportunity to visit other synagogues and hear other teachers that I might not have otherwise have heard. I've had the opportunity to be involved in national task force meetings that I might not have otherwise done, even had any reason to participate in. So my Jewish circle has gotten much larger. We've had the opportunity, because we're all virtual, for all of our faculty members at CBI to participate in learning this summer, which is so great. I want to share one other thing with you. I shared this with another clergy person who had the same experience. We were watching a service, it happened to be the same service. We were watching a service to just in our own places, and we both commented the same thing. It was a beautiful service, Friday night Kabbalat Shabbat, and then when you turn off the computer, I was surprised at how sad I was that it was over. And there was nobody there to hug or wish Shabbat Shalom. And sometimes I think we come to shul and we go to services and maybe we're in a rush to get home. We're tired at the end of the week, but I think I might linger a little longer now. It feels different, and we all miss Kiddush, just sitting around, chatting about whatever. Those moments are so important. And just the last thing I want to share, my daughter's now living in LA, and we were physically distancing, and I've seen her, but I hadn't touched her or hugged her in months. And it became the pain of not being able to hug my daughter. And she's been away. She was in Israel for a year. But this pain of not being able to hug her was unbearable, literally unbearable. And then I found out that it was literally unbearable for her as well to not be able to hug me. So we figured out a way to protect ourselves and still hug one another. And that hug, we didn't want to let go, and I'll never forget that hug as long as I live. And I can't wait to just do it again as soon as possible, and God willing, without a mask soon.
Thank you.
Don't take those for granted.
Thank you. Roberta, and then Miriam.
Hey, well, one of the things for us is our kids were screaming, we can't go out and get groceries or anything other than going to the doctor's. I will appreciate all the effort Matt has gone through. He'll go to the store and he'll have Sam run the bags up to our doorstep and drop them off and run back. And then I'll open the door and yell at him as he's in the car and wave and say thank you. But, you know, when you ask for 2 Empire skinless fillets around a pound and you get instead an in-bone turkey breast, it's called time to change what I was going to make. Happy Thanksgiving, you know. But I miss my grandkids a lot. And it's been very hard to see him on Morrie's phone, you know, with the, what do you call that?
Yeah, with the
yeah,
the video.
the video, because these air hugs just don't make it.
Thank you, Roberta and Morrie. Miriam Nino had her, I think, your hand up.
It's Orly. I'll say something. I think the thing that has been most challenging, but also most rewarding has been.
Orly.
It's Orly.
Because of the light, Orly?
Yeah, it's Orly.
All right, go ahead. All right, what a treat. Go ahead, Orly.
Hi. So what's been most challenging, but also most rewarding for me has been this opportunity to go inward. And I think, you know, so many people tend, me included, you know, tend to just distract ourselves with just all the things that we need to do, work, friends, you know, social gatherings. And this has been this opportunity to just like look inside and really figure out. I've dealt with a lot of fears that I didn't realize I've had, and, you know, shadows and just things that, you know, you never really take the time to kind of take a look at and really dive into. So I find that to be a really, really important takeaway. We also have a lot more time to do things like meditation and walking and just being with ourselves. And I think that's something that, you know, we've just been in this rat race. And I think people just like their whole life is just going through the motion. And this is an opportunity to just say, you know, let's just take a pause and, you know, what's actually inside, what's alive in us. So
Thank you, Orly.
Sure.
What a treat to hear your voice and for you to also create another focus, which is the privilege of this time as reflection time and to nurture our inner life and explore our inner life. Just take a couple more, and then I'll begin to pull it together in terms of what you would want to take from COVID land. All right, I don't see any hands. So not seeing any hands, let me just begin to pull this together. One is first to thank everybody. I feel so nurtured. My hand goes to my heart reflexively, looking and seeing all of you and the gift of community to share this with. It's gratifying. And one of the takeaways is the gift of community, as had been mentioned earlier. Both the gift of community in the larger sense of being able to explore other synagogues and see what's going on in the larger world, but first and foremost to see familiar faces and hear familiar voices, which is this moment, and that immediate quality of community, which is more than just family. It's a sense of shared experience with people that you know. In Hebrew, the word for crisis is mashber, and its root is shvur, that which is broken. So to be in a crisis is to feel that something needs fixing and in a big way, that there's something broken. And this is a time in which the brokenness is very evident, and we'll stay just focused because, there's ripples in so many other ways, but just the brokenness of our own feeling safe. That's the major brokenness that COVID land is defined by. And that same root, mashber, brokenness or crisis, is also used for birthing stool. In part, probably because women giving birth had a broken 2 stones that they held on to. But the same word is used, which is to say that from crisis comes opportunity, new beginnings. After, the First World War and the flu epidemic of 1918 came the Roaring '20s. That's just an example of a reclaiming opportunity and life. Of course, that did lead also to things falling apart with the crash in the late '20s, which is to remember that things are cyclical. It's not the first time we've had a grave challenge and uncertainty. I shared at the beginning of this conversation the report of my son John from the Mount Sinai emergency room, that all of last week he only saw 1 individual with COVID, and they didn't come in with that as the presentation. They were in a car accident, were tested and tested positive, which is to say that New York, which started earlier and was pretty vigilant, has to a great degree gained some control, which gives me in Orange County hope that a month from now, 2 months from now, our lives will be much different than they are in this moment, where we are on guard and have reason to be concerned of what's next. And so the last piece that comes not only with that Hebrew wordplay that crisis is a birthing stool of new beginnings, is there is no doubt that some of the takeaways that were shared will be ways that we move forward differently. We'll move forward with Zoom differently. We're going to move forward hopefully with baking and cooking differently. And we'll move forward, at least for a while, with valuing what otherwise we took for granted. We who are older know that we've been there before. When the country came together after September 11th, and we all said, we feel united. This is this should just be a new America. And we've seen, sadly, that not, if you will, last. That old divisions or even new divisions are part of life, and taking things for granted is also part of life. But when we leave COVID land, I don't know what the souvenir will be. We'll have to have another conversation. Linda in my home is filled with souvenirs from our travels that aren't particularly valuable in many cases, most cases, but they're reminders of where we've been and they're reminders of what we value. And so hopefully to own some of these takeaways, here's a thought to leave you with. What would be a souvenir that you might hold on to remind you not to take for granted what feels so fresh, precious, gratifying in this bizarre world of COVID land, that you would indeed want to be reminded of this journey that we've shared together?
A mask.
Well, I have hanging, not that I have favorites, but the truth is I have Rochelle's mask.
Yes.
And she gave it to me early enough that it had Pesach matzah on one side. That's how early it was. And I really like how beautiful it is. So it now hangs in here in my office at home. So clearly a mask has already found a place for me to remember this moment we're in. But each of us might want to pause to think, not unlike, again, when you travel abroad, you pick something up that is a keepsake to remind you. So with that, I thank all of the people, all of us who have shared this conversation. I'm going to line up a couple speakers in the coming weeks of different kinds, and I look forward to sharing more COVID land. Couple of infomercials. Tomorrow morning is Psalm 39, 10 to 10:30. It is, according to many, the most painful of all the 150 Psalms. So if you're in the mood to sing the blues, tomorrow morning, Psalm 39. Thank you for all being together. Have a good evening. Make great dinners and enjoy.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Enjoy the ones you're with. Be well.